Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. And today's episode is part of a new and special series called "Making a Difference: Supply Chains for a Better Tomorrow." So the current COVID-19 pandemic is creating many supply chain challenges for companies and organizations all around the world. But it's also creating and serving as a catalyst for change and innovation out there. So what supply chain capabilities will separate the leaders from the laggards, not only in response to the current challenges and needs that the COVID-19 crisis is presenting, but also to position themselves for success in the years to come? Well, that's really going to be the main focus of this series. And it's really my honor to welcome to today's program Blake Thompson, who is Chief Supply Chain Officer at Feeding America, Frank McGuigan, who is Chief Executive Officer at Transplace, and Leigh Robinson, who is Chief Human Resources Officer at Transplace, to share their insights and perspective on this topic, and specifically how the two organizations are working together around what's happening right now with COVID-19. So really appreciate all of them taking the time to be with us today. And Blake, just to kind of dive right into it, let's get started with you. And I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with Feeding America in terms of your mission, but probably not that many know about your supply chain. So maybe to kick things off, why don't you please give us an overview of the organization as well as your supply chain?
Thanks, Adrian. Yeah, Feeding America is the largest hunger relief organization in the United States. We've got 200 food banks in our federation, 60,000 agencies, and our team feeds over 40 million people that we serve a year, 4.4 billion meals served annually. And those are 2019 statistics, but we're a federation. So we are each food bank operates independently from our federation. We support the members and our efforts. Our programs that we support the Food Bank Federation with are around preventing food waste and educating the public around food insecurity. We have got a very strong government relations team that supports our efforts, both with policy and programs that support those folks that have risk with food insecurity. And we've been helping families for over 40 years. We've been in existence for over 40 years, established in Chicago in 1979 by actually the membership is where our origins start with. Prior to COVID-19, 1 out of every 8 people in America were struggling with hunger. And you can imagine since COVID, the impacts on the population as it's impacted the economy, not only in the US, but across the world. And you can see the numbers of unemployment skyrocketing in the US. I think the last number I saw was 36 million unemployed in the US. I think when this all began, we were somewhere around 3.5 million, somewhere in those numbers. So my supply chain team is responsible for demand planning, the food sourcing at a national level. So we manage the national food donor relationships, the Kroger's, Walmart's, ConAgras, et cetera, on both sides of the retail, consumer facing, and the manufacturing side. My team's responsible for 20% of the logistics that affect the network. So anything that any trucks we put under loads that we provide for the network, we manage through our Transplace system, TMS system. And then we're responsible for network data collection and reporting. So all of the information that flows through our food banks, we collect nationally and organize to do quarterly reporting from a supply, demand, and inventory level standpoint. My team's also responsible for an innovative technology tool called Meal Connect, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But it's a digital cloud-based system that we've been supporting for 4 or 5 years that gives us real-time access to food donations and connects those with real-time access to recipients of those donations at all across the level. We had a recent modification we made to the system with COVID that allowed us to identify rejected or loads that could not be accepted at retail distribution centers. And they connected those directly with food banks that took those loads of produce, protein items that could not be taken into the retail as their supply chains were disrupted and they were backing up at their depot locations. So, and my team is also responsible for food quality as well throughout the system, end-to-end food quality through the entire food chain.
Well, a lot of responsibility there, and I think you kind of see the banner, Feeding America, and like you mentioned, I mean, this was food insecurity was a challenge and a problem, even during quote unquote good times. I could only, and obviously right now with all the unemployment and everything going on right now, it's even a greater challenge. And just with the brief introduction there, all the behind the scenes things that have to go on to make this operation successful. It's truly impressive. In many ways, it's almost, analogous to what manufacturers and retailers and others, have to go through to kind of, make their operations work. Just to quickly stay on this topic for a little bit more. I mean, the food industry, like so many others, has been significantly impacted by COVID-19. You can't pick up the Wall Street Journal or turn on the news and see some kind of food related story, whether it's people lining up for food or disruptions at the supermarket level and so forth. I mean, what challenges has it created, for Feeding America and those you serve?
So interesting that, this has been the perfect storm. These are unprecedented times, clearly, not only in the food supply chain, but in the work that Feeding America does. And, our food banks have reported increases in excess of 60% of need for food. In that same context, we've been impacted because this is a pandemic, our food banks have had to be creative in terms of distribution challenges. So going through agencies or typical distribution methodology to get food to the food recipients has all had to change. I think back 60 days ago when we were having, live conversations with our Seattle team, and they were one of the first hotspots that had issues with agencies shutting down, with having to put in place low touch or no touch types of distribution methodology, and some of the changes that had to be made very quickly on the fly to support that network there. We've had agency closures as well. 20% of our food banks report agencies being closed. We've also had volunteer issues with, we've got about 10% of our food banks that have not allowed volunteers into their food banks. That we typically get about 2.5 million a year of volunteers through our system. And that's to protect their in-service, critical service employees for warehouse and logistics as well, and some of those areas that were hotspots in the U.S. So, those have been some of the challenges we've had. And in light of that, getting food has also been very much of a challenge with the retail supply chain in terms of the retail grocery sector that's been very disrupted, very high demand. We've seen a decline in donations. Retail food donations were our number one food stream for donations annually, as well as the manufacturing side. We're mostly dedicated to the retail. We've seen a 25% decline in total donations, 50% decline in those two categories. So not only have we seen an increase in demand, distribution challenges, but we've seen a decline in donations. So we've had to shift gears. We've had to quickly leverage a lot of the money donations we've gotten in with food purchasing, something that was probably about 5% of our food stream before, now is about 20 to 25% of our food stream. We've been very fortunate to get significant food donations out of the food service industry. With their business declining, we've been able to leverage some of the perishable products that they use. Their distribution sizes don't necessarily marry up well with ours. So we're not able to take all that food and distribute it through our network. But we've gotten some good donations through that group as well. We've also leaned into government programs. There was a real robust trade mitigation TFAP program already baseline through the balance this year that's really helped bridge some of the gap. And then recently, the USDA has announced some appropriations for additional TFAP programs. And we just started the CFAP program, which is a little bit different. It started actually last week. We're beginning to see some food distributions out of that program as well that'll help offset some of the donation declines that we've seen. So, one of the challenges through this entire process is to ensure, because the methodology for recovery and the different distribution methodology, we've had to ensure that our food safety requirements are being adhered to throughout the supply chain. That's been very challenging. And then on top of that, it's impacted our transportation and distribution methodology. So we've had to be a little more flexible in terms of where supply is coming from, how we match up freight with those donors. Transplace has really been very helpful in terms of working with our team to identify new opportunities and provide flexibility within our system to overall support our expense drivers within the transportation arena as well. The other thing I wanted to call out pre-COVID, and I think we've seen that as well post-COVID in terms of the opportunity, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we talk about the reinvention of our supply chain going forward, but it's pointed out our opportunity for distribution optimization. There was some work that Transplace did for us up in Northern California pre-COVID that really helped us take a hard look at opportunities within our network to improve what existed today with distribution methodology enhancements and optimizing a network through collective food banks. And that's something I think for the future that could be very useful for us, would be even more useful today with COVID. If we could expand in that territory today, it's very difficult with some of the changes going on with the interruptions in supply chain today.
Right. As you were talking, one of the things that we've heard about for years has been the importance of flexibility, responsiveness, and agility in supply chain management. And I think what COVID has done is really put the spotlight on that. And it sounds like from some of the examples you just gave there that, being creative, being, responsive and being agile in terms of changing processes, changing, the way you've always done things, right? And to kind of respond as best you can to the challenges out there has been part of the, the process here. So Frank, let me go over to you now and, talk a little bit about, the relationship between Transplace and, Feeding America. I know you've been working, for a number of years together. Can you talk a little bit about how and why the two organizations started working together? And
Sure.
You share some of the specifics around how the two organizations are working together at this moment to address, some of the challenges and needs that, that Blake just talked about.
Yeah, from our standpoint, first of all, thank you, Blake. And you can see, listen to what Blake is talking about. It's a classic case of supply chain disruption, right? 50 to 60% spike in demand on one side, a 50% supplier-based shift on the other side, and how do you make that whole thing work for you in a matter of weeks? It's an incredibly challenging problem. From our standpoint, we started doing business with Feeding America in 2011. Coincidentally, our organization has actually tripled in size since that time. And as we have grown, we arrived at this point where how do we take all this tremendous activity we have with, these 2,500 people across North America and focus focus their willingness and want to do more in their community towards something for a greater good. And not that all the work that was being done wasn't for the greater good, but we thought we got to the point where we could substantially support that financially and from a focus standpoint. And so we decided to formalize our partnership with Feeding America and provide a significant amount of money and resources to them in their mission. What do we actually do for them? We provide our logistics platform for them, which is our, as you're aware, Adrian, we have our control tower, data analytics, our engineering and data science group, as well as the full TMS, which is obviously automated information exchange and optimization and complete shipment planning and execution. And so we've been doing that for a number of years. And again, we're trying to support the changing challenges in the Feeding America network. But in the last year, we've actually donated more than $200,000 to support this company, and we continue to want to do more from a resource standpoint to help kind of the shift in what Blake's talking about, building and modeling a more efficient distribution network of the future, and we look forward to that.
That's great, and when you think about the being able to leverage technology, leverage the human IP, the talent that you bring to the table, and then just the know-how from the process, standpoint. I think a lot of folks, when you think about logistics, I historically tend to think about manufacturing and retailers, but when you think about organizations such as Feeding America, are the challenges similar or different, Frank? Are there things that you learn from the clients who serve in manufacturing and retail that apply nicely, or lessons learned that can be applied to something like what Feeding America is doing?
No, I mean, if you listen to how Blake described a supply chain, it is a classic. To me, it feels more like a classic retail supply chain, in that they're taking all these varied supply sources, and they're trying to distribute that across a fixed hub and spoke network in the most efficient way possible. The supply base can change or does change, and how do you do that in a way that works and works really well? And so how do we support that? Again, you have to engineer for success. You have to ultimately automate that and make sure that the information flow is going both ways between two companies, so we can kind of continue to dial in what network success looks like. But that's how I see your supply chain, Blake. Anything you would add to that?
Yeah, no, I think you hit it on the head, Frank, in your interpretation. And these are. I've been around for a while in supply chain and never seen an interruption like this, and this has been certainly very challenging. And we're a very complex supply chain, and nimbleness and visibility are certainly top of mind in terms of not only improving on our base, but also if there's other interruptions down the road, to be able to deal with those in a much more efficient way than we necessarily have with this.
Absolutely. So Leigh, let's bring it over to you and kind of bring this partnership down to kind of the employee level, if you will. I mean, how does this partnership ultimately link to Transplace employees, and what is the connection and impact for them?
Yeah, absolutely. Our employees have been connected to Feeding America historically in a couple of different ways, more from an engagement and a community impact sort of way, right? So the things you'd think of, such as canned food drives, volunteering at the local food banks, charitable giving, and those are really important things. And we've found that our employees feel more connected, they feel more engaged, they're helping achieve in a small way Feeding America's mission of addressing hunger insufficiency. But what we've found more and more, just broadly, right, this isn't Transplace, I think this is broadly, is that people want to know how their organization's purpose connects back, right? How does the purpose and the mission of my organization connect to the community, connect to have some sort of societal impact, some sort of social sort of positive impact? And so as we've strengthened this relationship between Transplace and Feeding America, we've seen our employees, their excitement, their engagement uptick as well. And one of the reasons that we, I think, have strengthened this partnership over the past year or two is because it's really such a unique combination. Because what we've learned from Blake and others at Feeding America, as he just spoke about, is Feeding America's mission and their need to address hunger insufficiency isn't exclusively a supply issue, it's an access issue, right? Access to food, access to the right food, to the right people when you need it. And so that's a huge supply chain logistics topic. And then if you think about our core competencies, our purpose and mission at Transplace, it directly connects, right? That's what we're all about. And so you sync those two things together. And I think our employees have realized it's amazing the sort of volunteering that we can do, but what we're doing as an organization and our purpose at Transplace directly connects to what Feeding America needs to achieve their mission. And it's just a really special way, I think, that our employees are feeling and seeing and having a little bit more impact broader.
Yeah, it's a great call out, Leigh. Our employees view the mission statement of Feeding America is completely aligned with the mission of Transplace. And so our employees feel 100% engaged in trying to support that mission of food insecurity. So it's a very clean fit for us.
You know, when you look at the title of the series, making a difference. I mean, part of that is, I think a recognition, Leigh, of what you just talked about. That I know in a lot of conversations I have with, logistics professionals, and particularly with, the younger generations and those that are beginning to interview right now, coming out of college or young professionals. I mean, one of the things they really look for is, how can I make they take a broader perspective, right? How can what I do as part of your company, make a broader difference? Or what is your position on X, right? Whether it's, in support of hunger, or whether it's support of the climate, or whatever, whatever's issue is important to that employee or prospective employee. I mean, do you see that, in terms of prospective employees that are coming in terms of looking at the culture of the company and what kind of giving back or making a difference they're making, in Transplace's case, what type of difference you're making from outside the four walls of the company?
Yeah, we absolutely do. I think some of the most common questions we get, especially when we're on college campuses, but really almost all candidates, they want to know obviously about our culture, kind of your values, your ethics, your kind of your lifeblood, right? But also, what are you doing in the community? What's your sort of sustainability look like? What's your charitable giving? We hear that a lot. So I think you're right, Adrienne. It's it's almost become a requirement, right? That people expect that your purpose and your purpose driven has broader reach outside of your own sort of four walls or your own sort of financial your financial gain.
That's right.
Great points. Well, Blake, let's bring it back to you now. And again, building off the theme of the series, I mean, what does building a smarter or a supply chain for a better tomorrow mean for Feeding America? In other words, I mean, what supply chain capabilities are you either adding or strengthening, again, to not only help you navigate through this current crisis, but really to position you for success in the years to come?
Well, there's three areas that I would call out in this, and again, these are medium and longer term solutions. Increasing our technology capabilities is absolutely at the top of the list, number one. Meal Connect has been a great tool for us over the last 4 or 5 years, and we've been able to receive some good donation investment behind that system. It's been very viable for the crisis itself. We've been able to adapt some of the tool to be more responsive to food recovery and placing that food in the hands of food insecure folks more quickly. But it's only part of the solution. And longer term, we need better inventory visibility, the connectivity of our food banks on a common system and pipeline. We need better donor visibility. One of the largest areas of food recovery we have is retail donations, and having visibility to what is available, where it's available, and how to connect that back to the recipient more just in time and more visibly would certainly help significantly in terms of the quantity of food that we can recover on that side of our food channels. And then we need deeper visibility into transactions, all transactions for freight. I think there's a tremendous opportunity for us to reduce our freight costs across the network with better visibility and a better analysis of that work. And then really the last area is really around agri-based food supplies. As center of store donations have kind of diminished, food processing or food manufacturing donations have diminished, we've really leaned into produce, protein, and dairy opportunities in the agri system, building deeper relationships with not only the USDA, but the industry, and then getting a ready pack size, because that's been some of the challenge for us, a ready pack size to distribute on arrival at food banks or in an agency would streamline that whole operation. That's one of the learnings through COVID. It's a little more expensive that way, but there are savings on the other side from a distribution standpoint. But there's been ready access to produce, protein, and dairy products through this COVID response. We've got to set ourselves up better in the future to be able to handle perishable products throughout our supply chain network and on the Feeding America side.
Well, a lot of great ideas there and initiatives there for moving forward. And I can't help but, that word that always comes up, better visibility, right? Better visibility, better connectivity, with stakeholders. And I think that's something that is a common truth or a common goal for companies just about in every single industry. Frank, just to build upon that, similar question. I mean, from your perspective, what supply chain capabilities will separate the leaders from the laggards in the months and years to come?
No, listen, from my standpoint, if you look, we still believe in the fundamentals. We do think that there are markets where you can survive as an organization by not having strict adherence to the fundamentals. But ultimately, if you don't have a digitized, highly transparent supply chain working for you, then you're not going to be able to do the things that Blake and his team are doing right now, right? And they're not going to be able to deal with kind of very volatile shifts in either demand or supply. I think about, and you know that we have a large CPG network here, Adrian, and if we weren't a highly digitized company, and I think you and I have talked about this before, we really execute $10 billion of freight with 4,000 people, right? We've had some of our customers had a 50% increase in demand in a week, right? And if you are a people-centric organization, which, people are the culture, they're the visionary, they're the innovators, right? But if you are relying on people to get that done, and as opposed to a digital framework, then you'd be in deep trouble, right? And so we saw our company kind of spike like crazy throughout March without any problems whatsoever. I'm really, really proud of that and what our company has been able to do. And so everything that you hear Blake say, our organization is working with shippers to provide those levels, that level of digitization, that level of automation, that level of transparency in their networks to ultimately give them nimbleness and drive service and cost. That's the goal. That's the goal of the company. It's the goal of our people in the company.
Yeah, that's a great comments there. And I was thinking, we've been talking as, industry analysts, and you see it in the press all the time about the importance of digital transformation, right? That's been a buzz term for the past, few years. And I saw this great, cartoon a few weeks back that said, well, who approved your digital transformation, project? Was it the CEO, the CIO, the CFO? And then the person says, no, it was the COVID, the COVID.
Yeah.
Which is, I think is putting the spotlight on this, that if you're to borrow a line from Billy Bean, the general manager of the A's, who presented at the Food Shippers of America conference back in February, he said, you can't operate your business in 2020 like it's still 1999, right? And I think that's something that a lot of companies are that haven't been on that digital transformation journey, that have been, scaling through adding more people and more paper processes and so forth. Those are the ones that are going to be struggling the most right now. And those are the ones that are going to be very challenged to succeed, moving forward. So as a way to wrap up, first of all, this has been a great, conversation. So I appreciate all your great comments and insights on this topic. But Blake, I'll end with you in terms of, ways that people can help, Feeding America right now. Can you share with us, ways that people can help?
So probably always the three best ways to help Feeding America is food donations, fund donations, and volunteers. That's what we operate on. And get a hold of your local food bank, find out if there's volunteer opportunities within that food bank. Those folks that have excess food or access to food, please surface that to either local food banks or our organization, and we can help you with that. And always, from a fund standpoint, we've been very fortunate to have been highlighted, in the media as of recent, have been successful in fundraising, and we're converting all of that money to execution against raising more food for the increase in food insecure population in the U.S. And just anecdotally, my granddaughter is a pre-K. She has one of her students that one of her colleagues that had started to raise $104. There's a magic to that number. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but $104 for Feeding America. And it was so successful on social media that she raised the total raised to $2,004, and she just hit that mark recently. So a pre-K was able to raise $2,004 for Feeding America. So they're going to present the check to Feeding America in the next week or so.
Well, that's fantastic. And, we're also honored to support Feeding America within our own company through our Indago research community. So if you're supply chain logistics professionals for manufacturing, retail, or distribution, check out joinindago.com, and you can select Feeding America as one of the charities that we've aligned ourselves with. You can select Feeding America as a charity you want to support by participating in our Indago research community. So again, I want to thank you, all three of you, for making the time to be with us today. So Blake, Frank, Leigh, again, thank you for being with us today.
Pleasure, Adrian. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say you could also get to the Feeding America donation through the Transplace website. And so if you're out, anybody's watching this and wants to donate, come to our website, learn a lot about the industry, and donate to Feeding America.
And thank you, Transplace, for your partnership. So much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Our pleasure, Blake. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Blake.
Take care. Thanks, Adrian. Good seeing you.
Great. Well, thank you. And if you're watching this episode on demand, either at the Transplace website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question for any of our participants today, you can post it there, and I'm sure they'll be more than happy to get back to you via that medium. Again, thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.
Thank you.